All right, we're back for another walk around the hobby here, looking at my collection. I'm gonna, in most videos, keep these random. I don't want to have it be like all vintage or all modern or some player focus, but there's gonna be two exceptions to that. One is this section of the video. I'm gonna try to call out a lot of my Negro League collection just because I enjoy looking at it all together. And I think maybe putting a spotlight on it can show people there's a lot of fun ways to look at it, or to collect this segment, including playing days to today, autographs, no autographs, serial numbers, not. So there's going to be a lot in here related to Negro Leagues. And then the rest, the other exception might be around El Duque, just because I'm trying to consolidate all the cards I have of him into one spot, but that'll be later on. So we'll just start flipping through here. I have two 2005 Topps Pristine Monty Irvin Gold Refractors that are autographed. These being two. So this one featuring him on the New York Giants, this one featuring him on the New York Eagles. This being the Negro League subset that I have flipped over here. And we're going to continue with a couple more from that set. So Josh Gibson on the Grays, and Minnie Minoso on the Cubans. These are all numbered to 65. I think they also have silver versions that are, they might be numbered, I don't remember, but the gold is the lowest available numbering. Josh Gibson being the replacement to a guy who split his finger. I think that guy was catching Josh Donaldson, maybe? Probably the largest snub of the Hall of Fame that I know of for a guy who isn't, banned for some unspoken or actual rule, like steroids or betting and whatnot. So this is different, another version of Gibson in this set, one on the Crawfords, one on the Grays. But both from the same year, 2005 Topps Pristine, both numbered to 65. And then here's yet a third Gibson. This one's also on the Grays. And then a Monty Irvin as well, which I think, it's the same one we saw earlier. Almost 800 home runs. Crazy. Going back to Josh Donaldson, I just watched a doc that's on Amazon Prime of him today, and it was made in 2021, 2022, somewhere in that range, as a push to justify his presence in the Hall of Fame. And unfortunately, he fell a few votes short. And I'm not sure that he's going to get another chance unless they form a new committee. But as part of the effort that went into that, they uncovered over 5,000 strikeouts and over 400 wins that could be attributed to him. Those, of course, were not always on the at the Negro League level, because those were formed. Official Negro Leagues were formed in 1920, and Donaldson played from 1905, early 1900s to 1940-ish as a player manager at the end. These are also a cool set. I'll put a few out. This is probably the cheapest but most aesthetically pleasing way to collect some of the Negro League greats. I think there's 10 players in it altogether. Judy Johnson, Cool Papa Bell, Leroy Satchel Paige, Ray Dandridge. Then here's Rube Foster, the founder of the Negro Leagues. Pop Lloyd, one of the greatest probably the greatest shortstop of all time in the Negro Leagues, another Judy Johnson. So I guess I don't have the complete set here, but they're probably on their way, because I know I have the complete set. But great write-ups on the back of this. So Judy Johnson discovered Josh Gibson, and then later Hank Aaron Josh Donaldson, again, come back to him, was also one of the guys who was credited with popularizing the candidacy of Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks. He scouted those guys as the first official black scout for the major leagues. He signed up with the White Sox. Unfortunately, the White Sox did not trust him to sign those guys, so they missed out. Yeah, I mean, I just love the shine on these. You can also get these in base non-chrome tops, and then base chrome, and then the refractor. I don't think these are particularly rare, you know, other than what a normal 2001 Topps Chrome refractor would be. Maybe one in a box or something like that. But since it's a subset, you know, and there was an entire rest of the set behind it, it's rare in that sense. I mean, there's plenty of other refractors that were filling the slot in a box. So I think I showed these two last time, but I just wanted to pull them out again to have them all in one spot. Yep. This is a beautiful subset here. I don't know if I have any others with me. Yeah, so there's still some others on the way. This isn't my entire Negro Leagues collection, but great artwork on here. I think, was this Krindler? Nah. It looks like Greg Krindler. I don't even know if I'm saying his last name right, but he's one of the best baseball artists living. And it looks like his style, and he loves to paint the Negro League guys, but that was 1992 Eclipse. That covered a lot of the stars from back in the day. This is a special card for me. I was at this game where he threw the first pitch between the Cardinals and the Giants in Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. That's home of the Birmingham Black Barons. Willie Mays, Satchel Paige played there. Bill Greason, the Reverend, being the oldest living man from the Negro Leagues before integration. He played for the Barons in like 47, 48, 49, 50, in that range. I think he got one shot at the majors, which we'll see here shortly. Oh, I did have a couple more Eclipse. 1990 Eclipse here. There must have been a couple of years of this. Let's see if I can call out anything here interesting for you. They did not bring up Ray Dandridge, even though he was in it, as he was in his late 30s, I should say. And Sal Magley says that decision to not bring him up in 1950 cost them the pennant, even though he was well past his prime. But on the back, it also references mentoring Willie Mays. So Buck Leonard, the other half of the Wrecking Crew, Josh Gibson and Buck on the Homestead Grays, Josh Gibson being the Black Babe Ruth, and Buck Leonard being the Black Lou Gehrig, which I think they say, yep, they say that right here. Buck O'Neil, he does have a pack-pulled autograph in this set. This is a aftermarket one. What year was this? I think this is 78-ish, somewhere in that time frame. This was after he got inducted into the Hall of Fame, most likely created for a autograph signing event. Also, I mean, you can tell it's the 70s because he still had a really strong autograph at the time. His autograph quickly faded once you got to the 80s, and age caught up with him. It got really sloppy and shaky, but that's clearly, mid to late 70s autograph of Cool Papa Bell. Here's another one. Just a cut auto featuring two of the best ever. I think number 3 and 4 Negro League players inducted in the Hall of Fame. I always like the back of this. No statistics available, despite being two of the greatest ever. Here you can see his autograph start to change. This is 1983. And his auto starts to get a little shaky. It typically dipped like this. I don't know why, but it was very common to see him like run out of space, basically. That's a buyback that was reinserted into packs. This one was owned by the man who created the Cool Papa Bell Great Plains set in 1976, 78, 76, somewhere in that range. And he put this card inside one of those, like on one of those cards. It wasn't this exact one. When he sold it to me, he told me it was this exact one, but then you later look it up and you can see that this one is signed Cool Papa. The other one is signed like here, a scan of it, which you don't normally see. And he said that PSA failed this, or at least called questionable authenticity, because they said we never saw him sign only Cool Papa, which I've since found a couple examples of. But he said, you know, I specifically asked him to do that because I just wanted something different. Which, as I pull out here, like that's typically how he would sign. And he asked just put the middle part, which does look kind of cool. So I might try PSA again because I have some examples that I could send them of, you know, like here are times when he did that. But it's also, I mean, I know the provenance of it, so I don't really need it in a PSA slab. That would just be for consistency in my collection. So that was a pair of Judy Johnson and Buck Leonard. Here's another pair of Judy Johnson and Buck Leonard from 1974 Laughlin. These, unfortunately, are pretty tough to find. Whenever I see them, I gobble them up. They're my favorite set of Negro League players, and you can see I have all the ones I can find. I had actually made the mistake of selling a number of these throughout the last 4 or 5 years. I've probably sold 2 or 3 Satchel Pages, and I only have 1 left. Probably sold 2 Cool Papa Bells, 2 Buck Leonards, 2 Judy Johnsons. This is the only Dandridge I've owned, and I'm going to keep that one. Signed a day before my birthday and 7 years before my birthday. And yeah, every time I look back on those, I'm like, you know, I wasn't really honing in on what I liked at the time. I had all these random Negro League collections, and I realized, like, that's the set. I mean, that was the first one that really highlighted them, and I should have kept them. So now it's really hard for me to let those go. Here's another early set, 2 years after the Laughlin set. This was Shakey's Pizza out of Seattle. Not only on Negro League players, but they sought to show, you know, the best players of all time, and in that they felt they needed to include a number of Negro League stars that have a rightful spot. But a promotional set from a pizza store in Seattle, so those are not easy to find. They're relatively cheap, and I don't know how many are produced, maybe 500 or so. So they exist, but those in those grades are a few $100s a piece. This being one of the more notable Gibson cards that you can get. All the modern parallels. This one's, you know, gold to 50, and I really love how they have like a scouting report they do the way with all Bowman, first Bowmans. So I went for the rainbow there. I missed out on the super when it was up for auction or up on eBay. I think it went for like 10 grand. I didn't need to put that much money into this. So I had the red at one point, I think, and then I had to trade it for some reason to get something I needed. All those times, you know, I have a lot of ebb and flow in my collection, and I just find that I learn, you know, what I'm willing to get rid of by, or what I shouldn't have got rid of by letting it go. You know, it's like hard to tell in the moment, and then sometimes I totally forget I owned a card and it doesn't bother me at all, and then other times I kick myself for letting it go, and that's when I know, okay, I'm not gonna do that again. This is a parallel to his 2024 Topps update. So this being the Sapphire, really beautiful pair, like I guess, what do you call a Sapphire? Variation to the base Topps Chrome set. There's a short print Sapphire version. And then this is the gold refractor of that. So that's what it's supposed to look like in base Topps update. But then they have a golden mirror, which is an image variation. So it's the same card, number 191 of Topps update. But then on the back, there's this golden back, and that's called a golden mirror. And you get a cool image, which both of these big ups to Topps. As you collect Josh Gibson, you realize it's the same photos over and over again on every card. These two I had never seen on cards before, so I had a lot of respect, or a lot of appreciation for getting a little bit of variety. You know, here's a good example. There's Josh Gibson again, 2006 Topps Triple Threads, his bat, same image, which is the same image that you see on the Retrofractor too. Just looks like they might have wiped out the Crawfords or airbrushed the Crawfords because they probably didn't have the licensing agreement then. But this is cool, like Pittsburgh greats, Clemente, Bonds, Gibson, 500 home run club, I guess. Mantle, Bonds, Gibson. I'm not sure why these three get put together. There's a number of weird variations in this year's set. 2006 Topps Triple Threads. They just put 3 greats on these cards, and that was the first release alongside Tier 1 that Topps, 2006. It was just after they bought the Josh Gibson, one of 2 known Josh Gibson game-used bats from the Gibson family estate, and they chopped it up and started putting it into cards. That was the first time. Buck O'Neil, unfortunately, posthumously inducted into the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, he missed out on the chance to see that himself. Here we go, Bill Greason. This is a Topps Living, so never really a card. Obviously, Black Barons in the 53 Topps style, but they gave him one many years later. Major League pitching record, he had 11 games, 3-3, 4.62 ERA. So, and, no one would say he was one of the greats, but an ambassador of the game, and incredibly still living today. He must be 101, 102. Elston Howard, here's a bit of my signed run. This is his rookie card, 1955 Bowman. I think I have 3 of these, just 2 with me right now. He broke the barrier for the Yankees, first black player, 8 years after the Dodgers signed Jackie. So that was obviously a shame that they waited so long. If you want to give them any grace, it would be that they had effectively an all-star team and had no need for talent. But, I would have rather seen them act more swiftly and integrating on America's favorite team or most dominant team. But 55 was the year they signed him, and they already had Berra, so he was kind of a utility player, and ended up winning an MVP in 62, I believe. Luke Easter, another tough one I'll go into in a second. Elston being a stud who had to bounce around a lot. He played almost every position for the Yanks. So Luke Easter, I'll probably do a little episode on him at some point. One of my favorite players to collect out of the Negro Leagues. Hit mammoth home runs, has records for being like one of the only guys to hit home runs outside of, like out of the ballpark, out of the stadium at multiple locations. He also unfortunately passed away. His real name, Luscious Luke. So I like the Luke connection there. That being my name. But he, later on in his life, he ran a union, a workers' union. I think it was some manufacturers. He was like the rep. He would worked at the factory, but also was the union rep at that factory, and as a result would take the risk of, just bring him back onto saying this, he would take the risk of going to cash all of the black people's checks at the end of the biweekly period, because at the time, for many decades afterwards, including still today, black neighborhoods are horrendously underserved by local banking. So you couldn't just have a check and drop it off into your bank account, or even to go to that bank and cash it was a risky move. And so Luke Easter, being a mammoth man, even in his 60s, said he would, he would take that risk and go cash everyone's checks. And unfortunately, one day he got jumped while he was walking back with, 10 grand in his pockets for all of his coworkers, and shot dead at gunpoint. That was in 79, I believe. So we're getting in, we're deviating from the Negro League's specific sets, but we are showing players their signed runs of their major league cards once they made it to the major leagues, who also were stars in the Negro Leagues. I try to do all of their signed runs, and these are just partial examples of, Manny Minoso being one of the best and most prominent Latin players to lead the way. This is his rookie card, 52 tops, nicely centered version. And then this is another one of my favorite stories, probably right there with Luke Easter. This being the 52 tops. That's a tough one for the set. I think it only popped 4 maybe. And Henry Thompson here, which I've never seen him sign. He always signs Hank Thompson. This is the only time I'd seen him sign Henry Thompson. That wasn't on a contract. So I thought that was interesting. And it obviously matches his 51 bomber there. Nameplate. I'll do an episode on him at some point. I'm going to do little player profiles, pieces of my collection. Sam Jethro is probably another that warrants treatment like that. He almost was the Jackie Robinson. He was viewed alongside Monty Irvin as being the 2 top players in the Negro Leagues. 2 young talents, I should say. Top 2 young talents. And he just didn't get that first move. And for a number of reasons, never saw his talent unfold the way that many had hoped him to show it. I mean, there was glimpses of it many times, but we'll get into that in another video. Jim Gilliam, unfortunately, also passed away very young, so his signed cards are tough. I'm getting really close on his set. This is Suitcase Simpson. I think he was top 10 integrating the leagues. That's really what I'm going after is, you know, the signed runs of all the players who crossed over, but it's kind of like the players who, you know, the first 10 in or the first 20 in is a fun way I'm thinking about it. Joe Black being another. And then the benefit of this is while I'm doing that, I get to chip away at the 55 Topps Dodgers team set, the first World Series they had, which included many very difficult players to get autograph cards of. So I have 3 of them there. Here's a Dobie, another a handful of big Dobies on the way from the vault that will be here ideally tomorrow. Oh, I guess the last one, and then before I move on to non-Negro leagues, is Willard Brown. So this is from a weird set, 1974 TCMA St. Louis Browns, honoring the St. Louis Browns where Willard and Satchel Paige played. There's one other. It's escaping me who also was on that team. This is the only card he had. He didn't have a card like a 53 Topps or a 50 Bowman or anything. So this is really his first card that was featuring him in a Major League uniform. There were a handful of Toleteros, you know, Caribbean or Latin releases that showed him, but this was the first time we saw him on a Browns uniform. It was this honorary, like, remember the St. Louis Browns set, and this is the only one signed. And he's a very tough auto in general, so when I saw this pop up, I mean, I was ready to do just about anything to get that. As a Hall of Famer, it is really the only way you can get a Hall of Fame rookie card of Willard Brown. I mean, stretching the limits of Willard Brown, or of rookie card. Okay, so we're gonna move on to other cards, and now this will be more random. I really like this anime set. Actually, I'm gonna pause here.